I read the poem High Flight when I was in 7th grade at a public junior high school in Massapequa, Long Island in, I think, the early 1960s. And it struck me. It was an interesting poem, and it was a good poem. I had never flown in my life. It was about flying and the joy of flying. But I could tell as I read, that is what flying is like. That I get that, you know? Why did it stay in my mind? Because I like to read poems over and over and over again. I like to be able to recite them in my mind. For no reason, just to recite them to myself in my mind. When you are young, you can hold on. You know, your brain is empty and therefore has loads of room to absorb. And so things I read as a child and young woman and straight through my 30s are committed to memory, and that is a lucky thing. Of course, Ronald Reagan knew that poem too. Reagan knew it for a different reason. It had John Gillespie Magee Jr. had been a figure in World War II and had written his famous poem when Ronald Reagan was an adult living in Hollywood. One of the reasons he knew it was that he used to take his daughter Patty to school in, I guess, the 1960s, and the poem High Flight was written on a stone or a plaque in front of the school. And so he knew that poem, I knew that poem, but I did not know that he knew that poem. I hoped he knew it, and I hoped he'd use it, but if he didn't know that poem, he was definitely going to remove it from that speech. But indeed, he absolutely knew "Slip the surly bonds of earth" and touch the face of God. And there you are. It's funny, I was thinking about that speech the other night. We all went home a little bit down. We were down, of course, because a terrible tragedy had happened. And we were down because it was just objectively sad. And I was down, and at first the president was feeling kind of down, because I felt the speech had not worked, and so had he. We just had that sense of it. And in those days, a president could come forward and speak from the Oval Office, and you wouldn't get reaction till the next day and the day after that, and people would ponder it over weeks. Now, of course, people would be on Twitter saying, wow, that's horrible, or gee, I really like this. But so we had no idea. It was not until the next morning when we knew, because phone calls started coming in, really sincere, kindly, encouraging, and grateful phone calls came in. From the president, he got a phone call from Frank Sinatra. Now, Frank Sinatra was Ronnie and Nancy's friend from Hollywood. And Frank didn't call after every speech. But after the Challenger speech, Frank Sinatra called Reagan and said, that was great. Reagan said, really? That was great. So Reagan thought, whoa. Then he started getting more phone calls. I came into the office. I didn't get any phone calls that night, but I came into the office that morning, and I saw a pink slip saying, call Tip O'Neill, Democratic Speaker of the House. Call George Shultz, the Secretary of State. I'd never spoken to these people. So I'd called them back, and they said, thank you. I found out you worked on that. That was good. So that was fabulous.